There you go. Okay, fantastic. So Be'ezras Hashem, let's jump back into our series on Yichud HaHisbodedus. Very, very special content we have today. Let me share my screen so we can actually all see the sources together. And here we have them. So we are actually just going to finish off the previous sort of essay chapter. We're up to Eis Ches. And then we're going to continue with a new parak, which I'm really excited about because it's really, really something extremely unique and special. Okay, so just get us back to where we're up to here, Eis Ches. Okay, so basically just to focus us, because it's been a week since we've learned, we are learning about the concept of a relationship with Hashem ultimately, but here we're speaking about even a relationship with others, that while there are external layers of the relationship, there's a chen pnimi, there's an inner grace, there's an inner sense of connection that transcends the more practical, pragmatic outer layers of the relationship. And he has been, the Rebbe over here, the Rav Kluker, who's writing the sefer, has been using the example of a chassid coming to the Rebbe and the relationship between them. And he said things like, I mean, we learned at the end of last week's class, even though there are external layers of the environment and the experience of coming to the Rebbe and all the Hasidim and all the various things that he sees there and the band and the music, let's say if there's a big tish, and they're singing beautiful Zmiros and there's all of that, true. But ultimately, when he walks into the Rebbe's office, there's just a moment there where all that stuff melts away and the essence of the relationship is shining. And obviously that's just a parable for the way that we're supposed to feel when we come into the presence of Hashem in Hisbodedus to spend time alone with our Creator. So let's jump back in. We're looking at Eis Ches. And he says like this, Kamoi Kain, the same is true, the way that the individual feels, just going back into that parable, when they relate to the light that they're gaining from the presence of their soul master, their soul doctor. There are all kinds of external layers of that dynamic, of that relationship. For example, everything he hopes to attain as a result or in the merit of his relationship with the tzaddik. Spiritually, right? He hopes that his heart will be open to love Hashem, to be aware of Hashem. He's going to feel inspired, or whether he'll be guided in terms of a practical avodah, what to take on, what to learn, what chesed to be involved with. Whether staying away from the things that should be stayed away from, or whether doing the things that ought to be done. Everybody knows how distant they would be from Hashem without the guidance of tzaddikim, like it says in the Gemara, mi piem anu chayim, that our whole life is guided by these compassionate and humble leaders who Hashem planted, as the Gemara tells us, in every generation for the purpose of guiding us. So there's the Torah, but then there's like the Moshe Rabbeinu guide who serves in the Lashon of Chazal as the sarsur, as the go-between, as sort of like the shadchan almost, the shadchan between the husband, which is Hashem, and the Kala, which is all of us. So everybody knows how much we stand to gain from the tzaddik. However, this is only in the aspect of like the technicalities of, what's for dinner tonight and, how that deal go at the office because we're running a little bit low for the end of the month. Like, these are important things, but between a husband and wife, food and money, that's not the essence of the marriage. Shebishas yichud, in a moment of intimacy, in a moment of a closeness that's completely saturated with the light of the relationship, an anniversary, right? Just a walk in the park, not on an anniversary or date night, just a moment where really they're spending time together in an intimate, like you use the word romantic way. This is not even time to express gratitude for all of the things that each of them do for the other. This is not where their heart is. At such an elevated and essential moment, all they can say to each other is just how much they adore each other. But it's beyond the aspect of, here's why, right? And the practical considerations that the relationship is surrounded by. It's just the relationship. I think we learned in a previous parak, there's a difference between speaking about the other and speaking to the other, So there's speaking about the relationship, and then there's just the relationship. Because that's the main thing. And because they have this essential bond, so sure, there are aspects of the relationship that are practical, that relate to parnasa, that relate to the food that the wife is preparing for the husband, that relate to, are we going to your parents for Pesach or my parents for Pesach, and which half of all this stuff, it's part of the interactions that they have, and it's part of their life together. But all of that is an outgrowth of this moment of chen, this moment of intimacy. This activation of grace and the nesiyas hachen, the carrying of grace, which each of them perceive the other to be, full of chen, is much higher than all aspects of the fruits, so to speak, of the relationship. They are very important, but But in a moment of intimacy, standing under the chuppah, we have a kala with us, so we're giving them a huge bracha that they should start their life together, and the continuation should just be so sweet and wonderful. I was zocheh to be by the chuppah. Right, at that moment, you're not thinking about all the dinners that you're going to cook for him, and he's not thinking about anything other than just you can't even put words to it. Just the bond of soul to soul. Everything else is an outgrowth of that. But that's the essence. Va'amnam, however, ka'amor, like we said, derech tzarahi lehisayir alachein achitzayni. It is much easier to just jump right to the external outer layers of the relational dynamic. Ve'inin achein apnimi harehi derech harucha. The chen pnimi is it's called the long path. There's the short path, there's the long path. Achiyesh ba yeser yishav hadas, menetias oimeka ikar b'shar shehalev. But at the same time, there's a presence of mind and a deep, deep connection that comes from the source of one's heart. That comes mamish from the deepest nikuda, the deepest point of identity within oneself in the context of that relationship. So coming back to that parable, when a person comes before the tzaddik, this should be our perspective. Person shouldn't be worrying, does the tzaddik want to speak to a person like me? I'm so distant from the tzaddik's level, and who am I? And look, I wonder what he's thinking about me. I'm so nervous, and so that's going to ruin the whole. That's going to ruin the whole encounter, right? Because when we cloud our subjective vision, so then the whole interaction is already soiled, because it really all has to do with the way that we look at things. If we come into the presence of a tzaddik, for example, assuming that what the tzaddik sees in us, like we learned last week, how the tzaddik looks at us with the eyes of the Berditchever, the Kedushas Levi's eyes, right? And all he sees is goodness and sweetness and holiness. And he sees that we came to this place because we're looking to get closer to Hashem. That's really what we want. So then you're going to be able to feel the intimacy of that encounter by being aware that it exists. Again, there is also the exchange of gratitude. The wife is thanking the husband that he brings a paycheck home at the end of the month, and he's thanking her that she does everything else with the paycheck that he brings home, let's say, if that's the setup. There's a time for that. Obviously, there are so many layers of the relationship. Going back to this mashal of a person and his master, his soul master, the Rebbe. Sure, there's so much to talk about. And spending time with the tzaddik is so enjoyable for so many reasons. There's also the aspect, which is a very important thing, especially in Breslov. It's spoken about a lot, the concept of vidui dvarim, to be able to stand in front of a tzaddik and to pour out your heart before him or her, right? And to be able to unburden oneself from all the challenges and all the struggles and all the mistakes and the galos, like Rabbi Nachman describes in the fourth lesson of Likutei Moharan, how doing so takes these mistakes that are etched into our bones, and when we speak them out in the presence of a compassionate tzaddik, so like the burden is lifted from us. And no longer are these errors etched so deeply into our being. There's a time for that, sure. But a person should be aware all of these different elements of the relationship, whether it's gratitude, whether it's apologizing, whether it's just discussing technical things, again, going back to the context of the husband and wife, but it's the same kind of idea. It's just about all relationships. These are only hallways leading to the thing, right? Meaning, in other words, these are a means toward the end, which is that deep, intimate inner bond that's beyond any words. It's beyond any practicality. It just is. It's just, and it might just last one moment. But somehow in that one moment is all of eternity. It might just sometimes even be just a glance or just, a husband and wife who are privileged to have the sweetest children, who are just acting so cute and sweet, and they have such nachas from them, and they just glance at each other just for a minute. And in that glance is the communication of, I'm just so grateful that I get to experience this together with you, right? And they don't need to say that with words. It's just there, and it's just a second. But in that one second is the essence of the marriage, is mamish the essence of the relationship. And with this, we finish the chapter, and we'll begin a new parak. Therefore, even though it's true, there is a thing called hanhaga chitzainis, as there are things going on that, let's say, might not be totally aligned with our sensitivities. We spoke about that in the beginning of this very lengthy chapter, right? Where not every relationship I think we had a whole shiur about how sometimes in a relationship, on the contrary, there are personalities that clash, and that's okay. That's okay. That's supposed to be, right? That way, right? That's the way that it's supposed to be. So not all marriages are gonna be, totally perfectly aligned. That's and not only not all, but that's usually the case. That's fine. But we spoke about how there's an akuda pnimis that goes beyond that. We're not talking about that now. It's not relevant. There's something so much deeper. Now, like I mentioned in a previous shiur, when a person is able to go ahead and to build that relationship and to lay that foundation, then come what may, they're always able to return to that fundamental point, which is deeper than personality alignments and, every single thing that they each do being totally, perfect in the other's eyes. Like, you have something deeper than that. And here he brings, it's very beautiful, he brings from Chaim Maharan. This is a famous source for anybody who's been privileged to go to Uman for Rosh Hashanah, the men. So Rabbi Nachman said, Im lechal, im shaloi le'echal. Whether you eat the yantiv meals, whether you don't eat, im lishan, im shaloi lishan, whether you sleep or you don't sleep, rak ach v'rak shatiu etzli al Rosh Hashanah. Just be there for Rosh Hashanah. Doesn't matter. And this is what you hear the whole time, because many people don't sleep as comfortably as they'd like to. Many people don't eat, as lavishly as they would when they're at home. And everybody's just repeating to themselves and to each other the whole time. Like Rabbi Nachman said, it doesn't matter. You eat, you don't eat. You sleep, you don't sleep. You love the place you're davening in. It's too long or it's too short. It doesn't matter. The main thing is, the Rebbe said, be by me. So the way Rav Kluger interprets this is Hainu, meaning to say, A'alai ta'ale, rise above these more practical, lower level considerations. B'shis libcha el nekudas hachein apnimi, sha'ata hiya ikar. These things, that whether you eat, you don't eat, whether you sleep, you don't sleep, all these things in relation to the fundamental nakuda of the togetherness, they don't matter. They just don't, they're not, like we say in Hebrew, lo ba b'cheshbon. They don't come into the conversation b'chlal. They are important, and hopefully a person will make the try the best for next year to try to work out a more advantageous sleeping situation, eating situation. But that's not the main thing. That's not the main thing. You can imagine a husband and wife, are planning out an anniversary together. And she has this certain restaurant where she really likes to go. Well, let's say it in the opposite way, which is more likely. He has a restaurant where he'd like to go. And they're talking, and he just makes a comment and pass. I would love to take you out. Let's go to that place, and she mishears, and instead of that place, they end up in some other restaurant, and he wanted fleischigs, and this is milchig. Figure it out. In a healthy relationship between mature people whose relationship is deep and real, lo echpat lo, it doesn't bother him. It does, because what does it matter what we're eating, milchigs or fleischigs? We're not here for the food. The food is here for us. The only reason there's food here on the table, the only reason we went to this place with a candle, and some nice background music and the atmosphere, is only to service the intimate bond that we hope to focus on as we reflect on another year of marriage and thank Hashem together, maybe even without words, for the privilege that we have of being able to experience this together. That's what a marriage should be. That's what a marriage should be. And again, we're using the marriage mashal, but it's true for friends, and it's true for teacher, student, hopefully parents, children. But it is also true, and that's the ultimate point, it is also true of our relationship with Hashem. This is all just a mashal. The only reason, like I mentioned in previous year, the only reason there are relationships in this world of various kinds is because Hashem wants to give us many different examples of the various dynamics that exist in the ultimate relationship, which is between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Second, I'm just trying to fix the camera. Sun is shining through the blinds. Okay, anyway. This is the main thing. We have to bring it back into the context of the nimshal, which is us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And to realize all these dynamics, they exist as well. Are there things HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do that we're not so perfect at? Sure. Are there things we want him to do that he doesn't seem so perfect at? Sure, right? Obviously, that's our deficiency. But that's not the point, right? Meaning in a moment of clarity, which is the moment of Hisbodedus. That's what it means. That's what Hisbodedus is. And we've been spending, months and months trying to describe it, is that here are a few moments every day where you can set aside all of those layers and realize that Hashem is literally doing the same thing. Where despite the fact that, again, like I mentioned, there are things we do that annoy Hashem, right? We're not perfect, so to speak, annoy, meaning we're not exactly as shining as he hoped that we would be and that we will be yet. But in this moment, like the Rebbe said, you whether you eat the Yontiv meal, whether you don't eat, whether you sleep comfortably or don't sleep, just be there. That's what Hisbodedus is. Just be there. Just be, there. Right? In that place, just be. And realize that what Hashem sees in you at that moment is just the essence of the essence of the essence. In relation to which all of the other elements, important as they are, it's not the sugya. They're totally secondary. That's not the nakuda. Okay, with that we come to the end of that very long chapter, but I think it's very, very important. And here we begin a new chapter, which is extremely, extremely deep. Extremely deep and a really high madrega. But the reason that he's letting us know about it is because he believes that we could, again, each one of us in our own way, on our own level, we could tap into it. And like the tzaddikim say, if we don't know that a level exists, we will certainly never reach it. If you don't know where you're going, you'll for sure never get there. So this is in the aspect of like knowing where we're going. Yeah, but this is a high madrega, but it's important to know that it exists and to learn about it to the extent that we can. Okay, so it goes like this. This is called Yichud b'dargas hanoisein u'machmas ritzoinoi. In intimacy, that's on the level of the giver as a result of his will to give. And he puts in the brackets here, in the parentheses, malas ha'hisbodedus hanasa l'loy tzoyert b'ratzon mitzad ha'makabel. The concept of hisbodedus, that is not a result of me coming to Hashem because I need things. Something different. Okay, so let's explore this together, Be'ezras Hashem. Ois Aleph, Noida, he says it's known, Shalachol hashpa ruchnis habami mashpia, any spiritual bounty, any spiritual just energy that comes from a energy source. Nitzrach lahaktem lakach his oris mitzad ha'makabel. The way that Hashem set up the spiritual realm is that in order for any of the spiritual layers, which we know are like concentric circles of an onion, each one is feeding into the next, right? The spheros are all mekabel from one another, and then they send it out to the next one, or the different spiritual layers of the olamos, of the spiritual worlds, that each one receives from the next and then becomes the mashbiah to give to the next level. Then that level receives it and it flips until we come down to the lowest level, which is called Malchus of Asiya, which is our physical world. In order for any of those levels of hashpa'ah to be mashbiah, to bestow their energy to the next level, nitzrach lahaktim lakach his oris mitzad ha'makabel. There needs to first be an awakening on the part of the level that's receiving. And when the level that's receiving sends up its desire to receive, so then the level that is bestowing is stirred and moved to bestow the shefa. That awakening from below, it's called, from the lower realm, right, from the realm of the receiver, is what catalyzes the desire to give on the part of the giver. The Nikr b'Svar Makdoshim, in the Svar Makdoshim, this is called Yeridas Mayin Duchrin. This is called the emergence or the descent of male or masculine waters, Sha'achar ha'alas Mayin Nukvin, which come down as a result of the rising up of the feminine waters. In this context, masculinity is associated with giving, just like it is in the intimate relationship between a husband and wife. And the feminine principle is the principle of receiving. And so over here, just like in the relationship between husband and wife, there's an awakening of the male, of the masculine on the part of the woman, on the part of the female. The only reason that that is the way that it is between husband and wife is because husband and wife are reflective of the spiritual principles of masculine and feminine, which occur all the way throughout existence, and this same dynamic occurs. In order for there to be the giving, there needs to be an awakening of the giver on the part of the one who's receiving. So it's brought in the writings of the Arizal. There are two layers of this awakening on the part of the feminine to awaken the masculine. Two different aspects. Two layers. We're going to explain this, hopefully in very simple ways. In order to apply it to a deep, very deep understanding of the dynamics of this tremendous gift and miracle called Hisbodedus. And more generally, just in terms of living life in the presence of Hashem's sunlight. So he says, here are the two ways. The first way is Shamakabel chafetz lekabel ilav esar hamashpia v'alkein ma'ir belev hamashpia ratzon v'cheshek lashpia. The first way is there is an actual desire on the part of the receiver to receive, and therefore, as a result of the desire of over here, we'll talk about the feminine principle to receive. So therefore, the feminine principle awakens the masculine principle in order to catalyze the giving, to satisfy the need of the receiver. And that's one level. When afterwards the feminine principle is receiving from the masculine principle, there is a receiving within the vessels that were prepared, because there were vessels. So a person needs parnasa, and then a person asks Hashem for parnasa because they needed parnasa. So that means that there were already vessels that were created. They were there, they were just empty. And as a result of the emptiness of the given vessels, so then we came to Hashem and said, please fill our vessels. We need parnasa. In other words, the giver doesn't necessarily have an interest in giving for himself, but he is inspired and awakened to give, because he is moved by the plea and by the desire and by the requirement of the one that's receiving. Therefore, we consider this kind of shefa, this kind of bounty that is the result of this kind of awakening, we refer to it as hashpa'ah, giving, that is on the level of the receiver. Because it really is all about the one who's receiving, meaning that's the reason that the giver was stirred to give, not because he needed to give, but because the receiver needed to receive. It was the giver, it was the receiver rather, that was missing something and now is fulfilled. So it was all about the receiver, right? And that's the level of the receiving. It's called hashpa'a b'dargas hamekabel. And that's one kind of hashpa. Biram, however, haderach hashniya, the second level, which is hayoser gavaya, which is higher than the first level, is sheyesh lenoisin mitzad atzmai ratzin lashpia bishum siboisa v'inyanav. The giver needs to give, not that the receiver needs to receive. The giver needs to give on account of his own reasons. Nothing to do with the receiver. And And the receiver awakens this will by saying, Hinni lekabel ata es hashpah shebedargascha. I'm here for you. And this, from the standpoint of the receiver in this context, is on a higher level than receiving when we need something. This is still receiving, and we still receive something, but not for us. We receive something because we are batal to the giver, which is Hashem. Li hamakabel ein achshav inin mitzad atzmi. Right now, I don't need to receive this. But kol inyani hu ach v'rak lias klilash ba'ascha shebedargascha umitzidcha. But my whole essence is just to be here for you. So right now, I'm not in the mood of this conversation, but I know that you are. And because I'm in the mood of you, right? Because I'm in the mood of this relationship, so then, yeah, I am in the mood, to, again, fill in the blank, to whatever it is that this person is interested in doing. So I'm not interested in going bowling, right now particularly, but I know that it's something that would make you happy. So let's do it. And again, it's not begrudging, right? It's not saying, oh, well, what a drag. Like I'm sort of forced to go ahead and spend my time doing something I don't want to be doing, for this other person. That's not what we mean. Here we're speaking about where the relationship is so deep and real that there is a genuine willingness on the part of the receiver, but not a willingness due to the receiver's own concept of receiving, but it's a real willingness because of the relationship. You understand? It's a real desire because although they might not desire this particular thing, but they desire this particular person. And therefore, there's like an aspect of kol iniyani, my whole existence, hu ach v'rak is klila hashpa'ascha shebedargascha mitzidcha, is to go along with what you want. Nimtza shelo yered hanoisin lahar es hamekabel. In this context, the giver didn't descend in order to give to the receiver, like in the previous context where it was all about the one who needed to receive. And so over here, it's different. Allah hamekabel el chek hanoisin. Over here, it's a different thing. It's the receiver rose up in order to become the context for the experience of the giver. In order to serve as the catalyst and in order to serve and in order to receive. And again, I want to make very clear, we shouldn't be confused by the terminology we're using, masculine, feminine. This is true on both ends, right? We're talking here about relational dynamics, not about husbands and wives. And we're just using this because in the Sefarim, the spiritual energies tend toward this dynamic, right? But in a relationship between a husband and wife, there is the aspect of the giver in the husband and the aspect of the receiver in the wife. There is the aspect of the giver in the wife and the aspect of the receiver in the husband, right? This is true both ways. Okay, I don't want to confuse ourselves with that. Okay, the footnote is not so relevant for us right now. It's just a little bit technical, so we'll leave that. And let's get into it over here on a little bit of a deeper level. So here we look at Ois Beis. The Yuvan HaHevdel Ben Beis HaMadrigas Al Yidei Dogma Menisuin. Here he wants to use an example for this dynamic, again, in the context of marriage. Sheyesh v'hakala bo l'nisuin mishum shekvar eina chafetz aliyas levada. There is an aspect in which a wife, a woman, a girl, decides to seek out a husband because she can't bear her loneliness. Like the Gemara says, right? A person doesn't want to be alone, and so they'll be willing to settle even on a lower level because there's just a loneliness that's biting and that a person doesn't want to feel lonely. Nimsa, so it emerges that if that's the whole inyan of the relationship, then it's like sort of a self-oriented motivation. It's like the only reason why I wanted to go ahead and get married is because I was feeling lonely, and now I am not feeling lonely, right? But that's sort of on a lower, more limited concept, on a more constricted level. Biram, but there's a deeper thing. Where Yeshu Mivina, and again, he's using the Kala as an example, but it's the same is true for the men, for the husband, because it's a two-way relationship. But there's another kind of spouse, let's say, over here he's using an example of a woman, who understands that my whole purpose in life is to be able to be a partner to this person. And without that, I feel like I don't have a purpose. And I'm like a lost object without an owner. I'm insufficient on my own, but not for me. For something bigger. For the relationship that we could build together and what we could accomplish only together. Not for me, but for each other. That's with that consciousness they approach marriage. So that they could both be, again, this is using one half of the relationship, but we'll make it a little bit broader, so that they could both be nullified to the other. Because they genuinely realize that we are only halves of one soul. And that I want to give to you. And the other one says, and I want to give to you. And I want to support you and partner with you. And I want to support you and partner with you. You see the difference? This is a whole different thing, than a woman who just feels lonely and so finds herself somebody to live with, This is different. Can imagine, right, a girl, a Nara, a 12-year-old, and one day, Taram Tam, a Tam Bedidus, right, who has never felt loneliness, right, by Elia Shalai. Right? The way that it used to be back in the olden days, people married much, 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 much younger. So like in the most pristine level of the relationship, she's not looking for companionship because she doesn't need companionship. But every little girl wants to become a Kala one day because there's this natural sense that that's the shleimus of my identity, is in the context of this relationship. And we hope that every male feels the same way, although we find many, many less young boys who are excited to dress up on Purim as a groom than we are young girls who are excited to dress up as a Kala. So maybe there is some inborn truth to that when we speak about masculine, feminine, even though both have both, but ultimately the Kala is the Kala. But there's this desire. There's this desire to really fulfill and round out the life of the spouse. Right. A love. And this is the aspect where the receiver rises up to the giver with a consciousness of, this is not for me. This is just for you. I realize that my whole identity is here in this relationship in terms of what I can contribute and in terms of the support that I can give, not the companionship that I can get. So this is just a parable. Now he puts it back into the context of us and Hashem, because we're all the Kala, right? We are all, it doesn't matter, we're men, women, we're all the Kala in relationship to the Creator. So he says, V'zeh hevdel bein rachik sheneskarev lebemi shenoiled kvar al toich hatachlus u'me'oidel lohei rachik. This is the difference between someone who's born far away and then draws close to a person who was already born in it. I can imagine Mount Everest, right? It's a mashal that's given of people who work for years, of planning and training, and they finally get to the top of the mountain. And you can imagine what it would be like to people who live, which I don't think you can live on top of Mount Everest, but some other mountain, let's say, and the children are just born there. So what's he trying to say? The Pashtas Nira, on a simple level, that a person who was distant and then drew close has a more intense experience. Because of that hunger, that thirst, that passion, that yearning to receive. But like we said earlier, and like we just described, Yuvan, it could be understood. That's just on the level of what this person wants to gain for themselves, on their level. Because something was missing. And they're now desiring to fulfill what they lack. But David HaMelech, who's the most feminine of all of our tzaddikim, who literally represents the feminine principle of Malchus. David HaMelech says, Ani avdecha ben amasecha. I am your servant, Hashem, the son of your maidservant. In other words, Hainu, kivlad hanoiled b'soich beis ha'adon. What David HaMelech is saying, not just I'm so devoted to you, I'm your servant. So then, okay, he could just say, Ani avdecha, which is beautiful enough. I'm here to serve you, Hashem. What's this extra thing? Ani avdecha, we say it in Hallel, right? Ma'ashiv ben amasecha. I am your servant, the son of your maidservant. What does that add? Says Reb Kluger, Hainu, this is referring to Kavlad Hanoiled b'soich beis ha'adon. This is referring to a child who's born in the home of the master. He's never been free. The moment he's born into service. That's his Yetziyas. That's his reality. Nimsa, it emerges that for such a person, he doesn't have any of his own vessels, his own concepts. His whole identity is that he is a servant. That's his consciousness, because he never knew anything else. That's what he's born into. That's his status. The moment he emerges from the womb, he's owned. As grating to our modern conceptions of human dignity, that concept is. But that's what the Torah is. That's what the Torah says. And that's how society used to be. There were people who were owned. So kasher ma'orer ratzain, whenever he has a desire, hareza mishum sha'amar la'adain, that's because he says to the master, Hare l'cha yesh ritzonos ve'inyanim. You have your own objectives, motivations, the things that you're trying to accomplish. Ein li hasaga b'hem. I don't know what they are. I don't even have any hunger for them because they're so beyond me. I don't even know what the world outside looks like. Let's say he's living on some farm somewhere. I don't even know what society. I just live here. This is just, you have your intentions. Again, this is all a mushal. It doesn't matter whether you love or hate this parable. It's just a parable. But what he's saying is, I don't have the knowledge, and therefore I don't have the motivations and objectives that you do. I don't even know what they are. I couldn't even want them if I wanted to, because I don't even know what they are. But I am such a devoted servant who is here to service you, that I don't need to know what the plan is. Just tell me what I need to do. Tell me what I need to do to participate in that broader picture. Tell me what I need to do to help facilitate your goals, even though not only are they not my goals, so deeply am I given over to your goals that I don't even have my own goals. I don't even know what a goal is, because my whole Yetziyas is this. So then, whatever we receive and the dynamic of our relationship with the giver is called on the level of the giver. And this is what David HaMelech was saying. Ani avdecha, Hashem, I am your servant. But you know what kind of servant? Ben Amosecha. Not a servant who was once free and then became a servant for Ger Toishav, or not a Ger Toishav, an Eved Ivri, or an Eved of some kind to someone else as a result of running into financial difficulties or having stolen and being incapable of paying it back. But he knows what the free world is. He has his own plans, his motivations. He's excited to get back to it after he's freed, etc. No. Because the avdus of such an Eved is still, he's working toward his own freedom. He's working toward his own goals. Hashem ani avdecha ben amasecha. I am given over to you in the way that a child who is born into servitude is given over to the master. I don't know what your plans are. I don't know what your objectives are. I don't even have any understanding of these things. I just know that I'll show up when I'm needed, even though I don't understand what the context is. Ben Amasecha. You tell me, you say the word, I'm there, because I exist for you. The Alpize, Hizra, Rabbi Kodesh, or Mendel of Vitebsk, Schusiak and Lehner brings in the brackets here. In accordance to this idea, this concept, the Heilige Vitebsker, the Priya Aretz, or Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, in a sefer Priya Aretz explains, Sha'arachik sheneskarev, a person who's far away and who comes close, yesh legam lahamshich aliyasa liyas kli b'dargas anoisi. It is necessary, even though on some level, we want things from Hashem and we get things from Hashem. We feel grateful for those things. To somehow, and we're going to continue in this chapter to discuss this very lofty level, to get into the mindset of saying that it is true that I get so much out of the relationship, but really I'm coming to be batal to you, to be bedargas hanoise, not bedargas hamashpia. Not bedargas hamakabel, v'hunesayin kashel mavakshe emes, and that it's a really difficult challenge because there's so much that we get, and so there's so much in it for us. And Torah and Judaism and Yiddishkeit and serving Hashem and mitzvahs are so pleasurable and wonderful. There's so much in it for us, and we're promised so much shefa, beruknias, begashmias. There are so many things that we ask Hashem for, that to somehow find a way to genuinely come before Hashem with the consciousness of ani avdecha ben amasecha, like not focusing on our own gain and motivation, our own what we stand to gain. It's super difficult, but it's a real level. And he continues, and with this we'll finish. I think we'll go until Eis Gimel. He says, Zeh hevdel bin geulas Mitzrayim legeula hasida. This is the difference between the exodus from Egypt and our ensuing redemption from exile, which we daven to Hashem should be today. What's the difference? B'Mitzrayim hayu b'nei Yisrael begalas hashibud. In Mitzrayim, Klal Yisrael existed in such a state of overt subjugation and slavery that Yeshua, they needed to be saved. And they knew that. It was so obvious that they needed redemption because literally their lives were miserable. The psukim are full of this. Vanitzak, right? They cried out to Hashem. They were sighing. The psukim describe and the midrashim expound and Chazal on the terrible, terrible anguish with which they lived every life, unimaginable suffering. L'chein ikri shira chadasha. That's why we refer to the song that they sang on the banks of the river. Shira chadasha shibchu gu'ulim shibcha al svas hayam yachad kulam. Haidu v'yimlichu, right? It was referred to as Shira Chadasha. What do we notice about Shira Chadasha? A new song. The Lashon Nekeva. The Lashon Nekeva, it's in the feminine term. Shira Chadasha Shibchu Gu'ulim L'shimcha al-sas hayom. Dargas hamakabel. Dainu shehikiru machasroina, because they knew what they needed. They knew what they would gain when they came back to Eretz Yisrael. When they came to Eretz Yisrael, they knew how much bracha they would get. They knew that they couldn't live one more minute with the pain and the servitude that they were experiencing. So when they came to sing a song to Hashem, the song of redemption, it was a song of the feminine principle. It was the song on the level of what they stood to gain. Shira Chadasha. Biram, however, Agu'ula Sida. The final redemption is something else. Shir Lashem Shir Chadash. Nikres Shir Chadash. It is referred to in the pasuk as a new song, but without the hey at the end. It's Balashon Zachar. It's on the level of the masculine. Hanebedargas hamashpia. On the level, not what I as the receiver stand to gain, but because we've developed and evolved our relationship with Hashem throughout 2,000 years of exile, where even though our lives in many ways are super comfortable and sort of fine, like we'll be okay with like a few minor adjustments, if Mashiach comes to today, I drop all of my motivations and all of my comfort and whatever it is that I have, whether I'm living in Lakewood or Flatbush or Muncie or Boca Raton or any place in Chutz La'aretz or any place in Eretz Yisrael, even with my own consciousness, and it's Shir Chadash. It's like, oh Hashem, I'm with your plan. Like I don't have a plan at this point. It's whatever you want. Shir Chadash. I'm overwhelmed by your plan that's so far beyond me because I'm just an Ebed Ben Amasecha. I don't know anything about your plans, your intentions. I don't want to know. I don't need to know. I don't want to know. I'm here for it. We are in Ezer Kenegdai. We, the Kala, are to Hashem a helpmate. We don't know anything about it. We don't know how it will come about. Everybody has different theories. All of our theories are so limiting because obviously what's going to unfold will be beyond anything that anybody can dream of. So we can think of all these different plans and visuals for like what it might look like. I promise you, it will be way beyond any of that. We don't know what it is. By Mitzrayim, they knew what it meant. It just meant freedom. But today, we're talking about a brand new experience of reality. Things that we can't even imagine. On the level of Ben Amasecha, we were born into servitude. I don't know anything else. Umahu Isa Ar Chadash, what that new light is, Ha'imid L'Har Aleim, that is getting ready to shine upon us. Umishum Kach, therefore, Einam Re'ivim Al Ikroi, Ki Loi Chaser Maisai, because we don't know what it is, so then obviously I don't feel like I'm missing it, because I don't know what it is. So I can't feel like I'm missing it. We learned something very similar just yesterday in Sichas Haran, where Rabbi Nachman was speaking about how he was constantly moving up and up and up and up, and progressing in his spiritual levels. And he told Reb Nosson that when he started his journey, he could never have dreamed he would get to where he got because he didn't even know such levels existed. And so he told Reb Nosson, I know that there are levels beyond where I currently am that are of the same nature because it's infinite. So I don't even know how to want them because I don't know what they are and I don't know that I need them. It's like they have this sort of in like meme culture, like the thing we didn't know we needed, or like, we didn't know we needed. Like there are things we don't even know we need. And then you get them and it's like, wow, my goodness, how could I have lived without it? But because it's so beyond where we currently are, it's beyond, like we can't even ask for it. We just know that it's good. Because we're here as part of a broader picture. So it's a shir chadash as opposed to a shira chadasha. This great light has nothing to do with our empty vessels. This is something else. They relate to the level of the giver and the giver's plan, motivation, objective. Sure, we yearn for the redemption, but we don't really know what it looks like. We yearn for it, but it's beyond whatever it is that we're yearning for on the level of what we feel we lack and that we will ultimately gain. That's the Yetziyas Mitzrayim. That's the Geula from Egypt. This Geula is a Geula of humility and bittul. To say, Hashem, I don't even know what it is, but if you want it, then I want it. Because that's the level of our relationship. Ani avdecha ben amasecha. And that's a whole different kind of dynamic than simply a transactional, functional relationship where the whole purpose of the relationship is that I'm in it for what I can get and he's in it for what he can get. This is something else. This is like an identity thing. This is where identities merge, where it's not a matter of, I am I, and I come into proximity with you so that I can further sort of enhance my I-ness. Now, this is something else. This is, I am only I in the context of me showing up in this space. Because I couldn't imagine living any other way. And I imagine that this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to express to us when he began with Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem. It's just such a tender thing, the Creator introducing himself to us. Like the Gemara in Shabbos says, Anochi is a acronym for Anon Nafshi Ksabis Yahavas. Hashem says, I, my soul, Ksabis, I wrote it down, Yahavas, and I'm giving myself to you. I'm not just giving you a rule book. I'm giving you me. In other words, I'm giving you a relationship with me. Therefore, it continues immediately afterwards, Lo yeh elehim acher mal panai. So after I've revealed myself so vulnerably to you, please don't turn to anyone else. How could you turn to anyone else? Don't you feel toward me the same way that I feel toward you, that ani l'doidi? That my whole ani, meaning the definition of my I, is l'doidi, is in the context of this relationship. Don't you feel the doidi li? And that's why the Chet Egel provokes such a cataclysmic, almost like catastrophic reaction on the part of Hashem. It's hard to understand. Hashem is Toiv Hashem Akol, Tamuru Ki Toiv Hashem, Derachad Darchei Noyam. Hashem's ways are sweet and pleasant, and Hashem is like, I'm going to wipe them all out. Like, whoa. It can only be understood in the context of love. If Hashem in that context is the wounded lover, who's not upset because there's a rule in his book that says, don't serve idols. It's so much deeper than that. Chazal use the terminology of a kala who's zinsa tachas chupasa, who's unfaithful already at the chuppah. It is a rebellion not against God. It's just an unfaithfulness in the relationship. And that's painful. And Hashem experiences that pain, kiviyachal. And Hashem feels this way about us. And all he yearns for is that we recognize that and then feel the same way about him. Because this is the way that he shows up. He's just... In context, Hashem is Ben Amasecha to us. He's totally with us. He can't imagine himself without us. If he could, we wouldn't be here. We are here because he couldn't live without us. It's like it says right on a person's birthday. It's the day that Hashem decided, the world couldn't exist without you. If we're here, we're needed. God doesn't do mistakes. He's not, God is perfect. So each and every one of us are needed. And Hashem wants us to feel that same way toward him. And that's what Hisbodedus is. So, and we're going to learn that next week. There are some times in Hisbodedus you show up with requests. And then there are other times that it's a whole different language. It's not a language of what I stand to gain. It's a language of showing up. Because if I can contribute, even though I might not understand what I'm contributing to, but I just feel this relationship so deeply, then I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Okay, so I think it's a great start into this parak. It's very deep and it's very high madrigas, but it's so lovely to be able to open up this sugya. And Be'ezras Hashem, we will continue next week with Os Gimel. Hashem's help. Okay, wishing everybody the most incredible, wonderful, amazing rest of your day. And again, huge mazel tov to the actual Kala with us, Sophie. It should be just totally smooth transition and everything should just be wonderful and full of light and joy. Be'ezras Hashem. And we should continue to share good news together. Hashem's help. Okay. Yeah, shukran. Have an amazing week, everyone. Thank you very, very much for joining.
ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני